The time had come for Desera's surgery. The workshop was quiet, save for the soft hum of medical equipment and the flickering glow of enchanted runes that surrounded the operating table. Eli stood at the center of the room, her face calm and focused, though a current of tension thrummed beneath her skin. This was no ordinary procedure. It was a blend of cutting-edge technology and ancient magic, a fusion that would push the boundaries of what anyone had ever attempted before. Jewel stood at Eli's side, her medical kit open, every tool perfectly aligned and ready for the procedure. Her great horned owl, Minerva, perched silently in the rafters above, watching over the scene with unblinking eyes. Jewel had assisted in countless surgeries, but this one carried a weight all its own. Desera lay on the table, her expression stoic but resolute. She had been through hell and back, having lost her leg in battle. For a long time, she had carried that loss like a badge of honor, a reminder of the sacrifices made for the pack. But today, things were different. Today, she would reclaim her strength in a new way. Standing nearby, Darren watched from the corner, his arms crossed as he observed the preparations. Despite his military background, the combination of science and magic was still a strange concept to him. But Desera had earned his respect, and he trusted Eli's expertise, even if the whole thing seemed beyond comprehension. Alpha and Omega, the wolves, lingered by the door, their golden eyes watching silently, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The air was thick with anticipation, and everyone present knew that what they were about to attempt could change the course of their fight against the darkness. Eli glanced over at Eliana Vale, who stood quietly in the shadows, her silver staff glowing faintly. Eliana had provided the magical elements for the surgery, ensuring that the prosthetic would become an extension of Desera's very being, grafted to her bone and infused with her essence. It was a delicate balance. Too much magic, and it could overwhelm her. Too little, and the procedure would fail. Jewel leaned in closer to Desera, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You ready for this?" Desera smirked, her golden eagle spirit animal, Kestrel, circling above. Born ready. Eli activated the table, a soft hum filling the air as the magical runes surrounding the prosthetic leg glowed brighter. The leg itself, sleek and silver, gleamed under the light, its design a perfect blend of function and power. The retractable blade Desera had requested was hidden seamlessly within, a weapon in its own right, ready to extend with a single thought. "We're going to start the procedure now," Eli said, her voice steady. "You'll feel a bit of discomfort, but we've incorporated pain relief into the process. Just focus on your breathing." Desera nodded, closing her eyes as the first wave of magic washed over her. The air in the room crackled with energy as Eli and Jewel began their work, carefully aligning the prosthetic with Desera's leg. Jewel monitored her vitals closely, ensuring that Desera's body was responding well to the fusion. Darren, leaning against the wall, couldn't help but mutter under his breath, "This is crazy." Eli glanced up briefly, catching his eye. "You'll want to watch this part. It's about to get interesting." As the leg began to merge with Desera's body, the runes on the prosthetic flared with a brilliant light. Desera tensed, her muscles straining as the magic and technology fused into her bone, becoming one. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't make a sound, her resolve unshakable. Eliana stepped forward, her staff glowing brighter as she whispered an incantation under her breath. The runes on the prosthetic shimmered, and a wave of warmth washed over Desera, soothing the pain and solidifying the bond between her and the new limb. The process felt like hours, though in reality it was only minutes. Finally, the light dimmed, and the hum of magic faded, leaving only the soft rhythm of Desera's breathing. Eli stepped back, her face betraying a flicker of relief. "It's done," Eli announced softly. Jewel quickly checked Desera's vitals, her eyes flicking over the monitors. She's stable. Everything looks good. Darren pushed off the wall, walking closer to the table as Desera opened her eyes, blinking against the bright light. "How do you feel?" Eli asked, her voice gentle but curious. Desera lifted her head, glancing down at her new leg. She flexed her muscles, and the prosthetic moved effortlessly, as if it had always been a part of her. A slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. "Like I'm whole again," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. Darren whistled low, impressed despite himself. "That's something else." Desera sat up slowly, testing the weight of the leg as she swung it over the side of the table. With Eli and Jewel close by, she stood, taking her first steps on the new limb. It moved fluidly, responding to her thoughts with ease. She reached down, flexing her wrist, and the retractable blade shot out from the side of the leg, gleaming in the light. "Well, would you look at that?" Desera murmured, her eyes flashing with satisfaction. "Eli, you're a damn genius." Eli grinned, clearly relieved that the procedure had gone smoothly. "You haven't seen anything yet." The pack watched in awe as Desera took another step, stronger and more confident with each movement. It was clear that the fusion had been a success. She was back, better than ever. As Desera tested her new limb, Eliana stepped forward, her voice soft but powerful. "This is only the beginning. You are stronger now, Desera. And with your strength, we will face the battles to come." Desera nodded, her gaze hardening with determination. "Bring them on. I'm ready." The room buzzed with the renewed energy of success, but they all knew that this was just the first step. Gunner's turn was coming next, and with it, the hope that he too would be made whole again, physically, mentally, and spiritually. For now they had one victory, and it was enough to remind them all why they fought. Together, as a pack, they were unstoppable. Desera stood in the training room, stretching and flexing her new leg with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The initial awkwardness had faded over the week, replaced by a growing familiarity and control. What had once been a source of phantom pain, where the nerves in her lost limbs seemed to scream in protest, was now calm. The sleek, engineered prosthetic leg Eli had designed was fusing into her body in ways she hadn't expected. Desera took a step, then another, the soft hiss of the mechanics barely audible as her weight shifted naturally. She paused, closing her eyes for a moment. There it was, a faint sensation, a brush of something. Almost like real feeling. Not just the mechanics of movement, but the familiar sensation of touch. She flexed her toes. Yes, toes. Something she hadn't done in years. There was no doubt now. It was as though the new leg had become a part of her, erasing the phantom pain that had haunted her every night. She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "Keebler really did it," she muttered to herself, a grin forming. The nickname Darren had given Eli was catching on, and it seemed fitting in light of her engineering genius. As Desera tested out her leg further, Gunner and Darren were in the armory, rummaging through racks of weapons. Darren, now a more familiar presence among the pack, had taken to wandering the workshop and poking through various rooms with a soldier's curiosity. "Keebler's a genius," Darren said, inspecting a particularly advanced firearm. "But I gotta ask her about making me something old school." Gunner, seated nearby with his arms crossed, raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "A 12-gauge shotgun," Darren replied, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "Something classic, something that packs a punch, you know? All this fancy tech is great, but sometimes you just need raw firepower." Gunner smirked, his one eye catching the light. "That's a bit more your style, isn't it?" "You know it," Darren shot back. "Figured I'd give Keebler a challenge." He gave a playful wink, and the two shared a rare moment of lightness, a break in the constant tension that had surrounded the pack. Later that day, Darren tracked down Eli, who was working on another set of blueprints at her workstation. He approached, leaning on the doorway with an easygoing smile. "Keebler, got a minute?" Eli turned from her sketches, raising an eyebrow. "What now, Darren? Not interested in any more of the high-tech stuff?" I've got something a bit simpler in mind, Darren replied, stepping into the room. How about you whip me up a good old 12 gauge? None of this fancy plasma or energy rounds, just something that shoots a lot of lead. Eli chuckled, shaking her head. A shotgun? Really? Hey, sometimes you can't beat the classics. Eli rolled her eyes but couldn't help but smile. All right. I'll see what I can do. I've been so focused on the leg project, but a shotgun? That'll be a nice break. Darren grinned. I knew you'd come through. Just don't make it too fancy. I don't need any of those exploding rounds yet. Eli smirked, gathering up her tools. Sure thing, Darren. I'll keep it simple, but you owe me. Oh, I'll think of something, Darren said with a wink as he left the workshop. Meanwhile, Desera was moving effortlessly around the training area, testing her limits. The new leg had given her back more than just mobility. It had given her confidence. The rest of the pack watched from a distance, admiring her progress. Clara, with her watchful eyes, leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, nodding in approval. You're doing great, Desera, Clara called out. It's like you never skipped a beat. Desera laughed, kicking her leg out with exaggerated motion, showing off the fluidity of the prosthetic. I swear this thing's better than my old leg. Jewel walked over, smiling warmly. It's good to see you like this, Desera. I remember how hard it was when you first lost the leg. You've come a long way. Yeah, Desera agreed, her tone turning serious for a moment. Feels like I'm finally whole again. No more ghost pains. Just me. Clara smiled faintly, her gaze softening. You've always been whole, Desera. Now you just have the tool to match. As the day wore on, Eli worked on designing Darren's shotgun, while Desera continued to test the limits of her new leg. The pack could feel the tension that had hung in the air since Gunner's return slowly beginning to lift. Each member, in their own way, was starting to heal. But deep down, they all knew the peace wouldn't last forever. The tension in the workshop had begun to ease in the days following Desera's successful surgery. She was walking better than anyone had anticipated. Her new leg not only functional but truly a part of her now. Her strength had returned, and she had begun training again, her movements swift and precise. It gave the team hope. If it could be done for Desera, it could be done for Gunner. But despite this, Gunner remained distant. His body was healing, but his spirit still seemed far from the rest of the pack. He'd often find himself staring out the window, his mind wandering to darker places. Darren, however, had other plans. Keebler, you got something for me? Darren asked, walking into the armory with a smirk. His nickname for Eli had stuck despite her many protests. Eli rolled her eyes but couldn't help the grin that tugged at her lips. Yeah, I've got something for you. She motioned for Darren to follow her deeper into the armory. There, resting on the table, was the custom shotgun she had been working on. The sleek black 12-gauge shotgun gleamed under the low light, and the runes etched along the barrel faintly shimmered with energy. Darren's eyes lit up as soon as he saw it. Now that's what I'm talking about. Eli picked it up and handed it to him, a bit of pride in her expression. Enhanced rounds, custom made just for you. You'll find it has a little more kick than your average shotgun. Darren hefted the gun, testing its weight and balance. The runes caught his eye. What are the fancy markings for? Protection and accuracy, mostly, Eli explained. It's been infused with magic, mostly for demonic encounters, but it'll work on anything else that gets in your way. You can thank Vale for the runes. Darren whistled low, clearly impressed. Not bad for an elf. Let's take it for a spin, yeah? Eli's grin widened. I thought you'd say that. But I want Gunner to come too. Darren raised an eyebrow, clearly doubtful. You think he's up for it? He needs it, Eli said firmly. And if anyone can drag him out of that room, it's you. Darren slung the shotgun over his shoulder and nodded. Let's do it then. Darren found Gunner sitting by the window, his one good eye distant. His left arm was gone, replaced by a bandaged stump, and his face was pale and drawn. Darren didn't bother with subtlety. He was never one for it. "All right, brother," Darren said, stepping into the room. "Time to get off your ass and come outside with me." Gunnar glanced at him, his expression unchanging. "I'm fine here." "Bullshit," Darren shot back, his voice sharp but not unkind. "You've been sitting in this room long enough. Eli made me a new toy and we're going to the range. You're coming with us." Gunnar didn't respond at first, his gaze drifting back to the horizon outside. Darren sighed, stepping closer. "Look, I get it," Darren said, his voice softer now. "You've been through hell, but sitting in here isn't going to fix anything. You're still Gunnar, you're still the alpha, and we need you out there." After a long moment, Gunnar finally stood, though his movements were slow and deliberate. With only one arm, he struggled to adjust his jacket, and Darren moved to help. Gunnar shot him a glare, but Darren ignored it and helped him with the jacket anyway. "Fine," Gunnar muttered, giving in. Darren smirked and clapped him on the back. "That's the spirit. Let's go blow some stuff up." The range was set up in the back of the workshop, a wide-open space with targets scattered across the field. As they arrived, Eli was already there, setting up some additional targets for the shotgun test. Darren handed the shotgun to Gunnar. "Here, try this out." Gunnar looked at him, raising an eyebrow. "I only have one arm, idiot." Darren chuckled, but there was a flicker of something serious behind his eyes. "That's why we're here, Gunnar. We'll make it work." Gunnar hesitated, staring down at the shotgun in his one remaining hand. It felt foreign to him now, awkward and heavy. He had spent years fighting with both arms, both hands. But now... Eli stepped forward, her expression gentle but firm. "You're still the best marksman we've got, Gunnar. And you don't need two arms for this. Let's get creative." With Darren's help, Gunnar positioned the shotgun against his side, steadying it with his one hand. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. He aimed at the nearest target, took a deep breath, and fired. The kick from the first round was heavy, jarring his body, but he managed to keep his stance. The shot hit dead center, the target exploding into pieces. Darren grinned wide. "Hell yeah!" Gunnar fired again, this time hitting a target farther down the range. Each shot sent a jolt through his body, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, he could feel the tension beginning to ease. It wasn't much, but it was something. After a few more rounds, Gunnar handed the shotgun back to Darren. "It's good." Darren took it, clearly pleased. "Damn right it is." Eli watched the exchange, her eyes softening as she saw the glimmer of the old Gunnar returning. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. "There's something else we need to talk about." Gunnar turned to her, his expression guarded. "The arm," Eli said. "It's ready." Gunnar stiffened slightly, his eye flicking to the empty space where his arm used to be. He hadn't wanted to think about it, hadn't wanted to face it, but now there was no avoiding it. Eli placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Jewel, Vale, and I are ready whenever you are, but you need to make the choice." For a moment, Gunnar didn't say anything, his gaze drifting back to the targets on the range. He flexed his remaining hand, feeling the ache in his muscles, the weight of everything that had happened. Finally, he nodded. "All right, let's do it." Eli gave him a small, reassuring smile. "We'll start the preparations. You won't be alone in this." As Gunnar stood there watching the range, he knew that the hardest battle wasn't behind him. It was just beginning. But this time, he had the pack by his side. And that made all the difference.